Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to explain the definition of arousal. So first, let's talk about what is arousal in the first place. So the arousal is defined as changes in the body and the brain that motivate to take action. So this sounds pretty complicated, right? What changes and how, why are these changes occurring? Well, to put that into a little bit of context, let's take the example of when you're hungry. When you're hungry, there are neurotransmitters as well as hormones. I'm sure you guys have heard of um, leptin, ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and the satisfaction hormone, as well as serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter associated with emotions, especially hunger, and aggression associated with hunger as well. When these chemicals are released in the brain and the body, it tells your body, or it motivates your body in another sense, to look for food. Another example is in public speaking, right? So when you are publicly speaking, you have there are certain chemicals that are released in your brain as well as your body, such as epinephrine due to the adrenaline that you feel or that rush or fear that you feel. That's epinephrine acting that mobilizes you and makes you on hyper alert when you're giving public speech, that motivates your body to start sweating or to increase your heart rate or to increase your breathing rate. So basically, all it means is that any response to a stimulus in your environment is arousal. So now that we understand the definition of arousal, let's go into the roles of the neurotransmitters associated with arousal. The first one we're going to talk about is dopamine. I'm sure you all have heard of dopamine, and the most common association of dopamine is actually Parkinson's disorder, right? Parkinson's disorder is categorized by the depletion of dopaminergic neurons in the brain, particularly in the substantia nigra. And the reason that's so important is because you see Parkinson's associated with tremors. In other words, tremors are basically your body being unable to control when to start and stop movement. So if you remember it that way, dopamine is particularly associated with movement during arousal. Then you have serotonin. So we kind of talked about serotonin earlier on in the video when I talked about hunger. So serotonin is actually the neurotransmitter associated with emotions during arousal. So it can account for things like happiness, sadness, aggression, and hunger. And so actually, fun fact, serotonin actually also works with GABA, the inhibitory neurotransmitter to encode for aggression. So to let you know, and actually the feeling that you feel of hunger when you're hungry is also controlled by serotonin. So serotonin also encodes for a lot of other emotions, which I can't think of off the top of my head, but you get the idea, right? So norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is a really interesting and one of, in my opinion, the most critical neurotransmitters for arousal because it encodes your stress, right? So arousal is basically a response to a stimulus, which may be stressful, right? So norepinephrine is the hormone that enables you to get ready for stressful environments. For example, it increases your heart rate, it increases the release of epinephrine. It also works on particularly focusing and hyper focusing on your environment. And in conjunction with this neurotransmitter, acetylcholine and histamine work to increase or decrease the level of arousal your body is going through. So, to give you an example of what that might look like, right? What do you mean by the levels of arousal? Well, when you have low arousal or when you're not particularly engaged with the subject, so take the example of listening to class. If you're in math class and the material seems really easy to you, you've encountered it multiple times, so it's not very hard, you are under a low arousal situation because there's not much stimulus for you to be engaging with. Therefore, it's really easy to transfer from a state of low arousal to the sleep state. And conjunct, however, if you are in, say, AP chemistry, where you're engaging with loads and loads of material on acids and bases and buffers, which is completely new to you, and you're under high engaging with the material, but you're not scared, right? You're just engaging with it. You're under moderate arousal because you're trying to constantly engage and learn new things. Then comes the conversation with, say, the President of America. This is a high stakes conversation which determines a lot for your future. So in this case, what you're going to have is an influx of acetylcholine and histamine, right? So in other words, you're going to feel high amounts of stress, so a lot of norepinephrine going on, as well as acetylcholine and histamine to increase that stress response so that you're hyper aware and hyper alert. So this means that you're in kind of like an anxiety state, which means that it's very, very difficult for you to transition into the sleep state because you're already hyper aroused. So those are the five main neurotransmitters you need to know, and as well as a general definition of arousal. In the next video, we'll go over the types of arousal. There are a few types of arousal that you need to be familiar with, as well as the chemicals that are associated with that specific type of arousal. So I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, everyone.